Hey, what's going on, everyone? Mike here in the BFH garage. And today I'm going to be replacing the front track bar in my 99 TJ here. I've had the current track bar. It's a metal cloak track bar. I've had it in there for well over a dozen years, and it's served me fine. No true complaints. I do have a few gripes on it, and that's why I'm changing my track bar out. My main thing that I don't like about the metal cloak track bar is that it uses a Heim joint up front, and that Heim joint wears out quickly. They squeak, they get dirty, they wear down really, really fast. And I'm just over having to replace a Heim joint, every couple seasons or every season. I'm over it. So anyway, I'm moving on to the Rock Jock track bar here, and this uses a Johnny joint at both ends, and the Johnny joints are great for a long time, require minimal maintenance. They can be rebuilt fairly easily, and it's just going to be a better fit for me. So I'm going to show you how to do this because I'm expecting some new people watching the channel that are trying to find information on how to do stuff like this. There's one topic I haven't covered, and we're going to do it now. So come on over, let's talk about it. Before we get down in front of the Jeep and I show you how everything is set up, I quickly just want to talk about the track bar and what it does. So a track bar is simply a link between the axle and the frame, and what it does is it keeps the axle centered underneath your Jeep as you're driving down the road. So you have your control arms that keeps them from going forward and backwards. It allows it to go up and down, but it won't let you go forward backward. Well, the track bar goes sideways or perpendicular to the control arms, and what it does, it keeps your axle from being way out here or way over here. It keeps it centered underneath your Jeep. So you have a frame side joint, and then you have a joint that goes into the axle, and like I said, the entire job of this thing is to keep your axle centered underneath your Jeep. Now, with that being said, understand when you're driving down the road, so this is going to be offset, similar to this, is you're driving down the road and you hit a bump and your axle goes up, this side's going to go up. This side pretty much stays attached to the frame there. The axle will go up, which makes this side go up. And as you can see, this thing works on an arc here. So as it goes up, your axle is going to shift that way for that bump event. Now, if you get a little bit airborne and that axle comes down, this is going to swing down with it, and it's going to shift the axle that way. So imagine you're driving down the road and you're hitting all these bumps, off center, whatever, it doesn't matter. As that Jeep's going down the road, that track bar's sole job is to keep it centered underneath the Jeep within reason along that arc. So I'm not going to go into any more than that on it. Come on over here, let's take a look at that front end. I'll show you what I currently have and what my plan is to replace it. So come on. Here we are underneath the front of my Jeep. This bar right here, that is my track bar. Right there is the Heim joint I was talking about. It makes the connection to the frame side bracket right there. As you come down here, it makes the connection to the axle via the axle bracket right here. My brackets are aftermarket. They're going to look a little bit different than yours, but generally speaking, it's going to be the same. So one of the questions, Meg, is why do we need to change out a track bar in the first place? Well, in its stock configuration, a track bar is fixed. It does not have an adjustable end whatsoever. In its stock configuration, there's no need for it to be adjustable because they're producing these things in mass quantities all the same, and they just make a standard size track bar that fits the front of all these axles. Well, when you go to lift your Jeep, for example, this one here has got a 4-inch lift on it. Well, when you lift it, think back to what I was talking about on this arc here. So in a stock configuration, this track bar is going to be more or closer to parallel, not completely, but closer to parallel here. So when you raise it via springs, this end goes up and it makes it a sharper angle. Thinking about that arc now, if I'm making that angle sharper, it's going to shift my axle out to the driver's side. So what I want to do is be able to keep it centered underneath the Jeep and not sticking out one side. The other disadvantage of stock track bars is you don't get as much misalignment and articulation out of it, as well as they are going to be a weaker bar in general. So aftermarket bars such as Metal Cloak or my Rock Jock one that I have now, they have an adjustable end up here. I've shaved this down, so you know, making my own brackets and things like that, I've modified mine. But anyway, this end is adjustable, so if I needed to, I could extend that out that way, which would effectively move the axle this way. So if you think about this Heim joint, if I start unthreading it and it starts showing threads here, that means it's getting longer. And if it's getting longer, it's pushing this way, so I can move my axle left or right to get it exactly where I want it underneath the Jeep. So ideally, you want it centered directly underneath your Jeep, and that's the whole point for an adjustable track bar. Simple as that. All right, all we have to do now to get this thing removed is remove the axle side bolt from the bracket here, and then we're going to remove the frame side bolt there and that track bar. As long as it's not under any type of tension, it'll drop right out. And if not, I can force it out over here, and then that'll loosen up that side right there. When we go to put it back in, it's going to be a little bit of a different story, because once I pull this thing out, it's going to shift one way or the other, and then we're going to have to get creative to hold it in alignment in direct center as we attach the new track bar. And I'm going to show you how to do all that right now. So first thing we need to do, get these two bolts out. We'll drop this track bar, and then I'm going to show you how to align or center your axle underneath your Jeep. Once we get those bolts loose, the track bar drops right out. Should be a little washer up here somewhere. There it is. It's actually a little spacer. But anyway, that's it. Track bar's out. The thing is, now the Jeep can move side to side. You see how there's all that wiggle room right there? That's because there's no track bar installed. Before we install that other track bar, with it out of the way, it's going to be far easier now to show you exactly what we need to do to center or find center for the axle. When you're looking up from the bottom side, you're going to see on the frame over here and over here, the frame kind of narrows and then it goes back out. So find the narrow spot between those 2 points. Get my hand up here. And you're going to take a measurement, and now understand your oil pan is going to get in the way slightly, but I don't let that bother me. It's going to be really, really close to that. So as I measure, it's approximately 24 3/8 of an inch. So what I need to do is find 12 5/16 on my oil pan here. And I'm going to mark it because right over the axle, this is going to be a great place to drop a plumb bob. So 12 5/16 is going to put me roughly right here. And then now what I got to do is find center of the axle. I'm going to show you how to do that here as I get underneath here. And then the easiest way to do this is to take a magnet, a plumb bob with a string, and you're going to take the string, put it underneath the magnet. The magnet's going to hold it to the oil pan on your mark, and it's going to plumb down right to the top of the axle tube, and then you can adjust and shift your axle tube left or right until it's perfectly centered, and then we adjust the track bar to that. That is what gets it centered. A lot of people make the mistake of they leave the track bar at whatever length it got shipped at, and then they shift the axle in relationship to the frame and make it fit that way, and then it's off. You need to get everything centered up first, then you adjust that track bar to the exact width and the bolts slide right in. You shouldn't have to fight anything as you're doing this. So let me show you how to get the center on this axle. Let's talk about centering the axle now. I can't just measure from side to side. You got a big old pumpkin in the way here, and it's just awkward to try to see everything lined up and make sure you're good. So there's 3 points I use as reference points when looking for the center of an offset front axle. In this case here, when you look all the way over here, this piece right there with the rounded edge goes up and it rounds up over the top. That holds your ball joints, which in turn holds your knuckle. Same thing on both sides. You're going to see right here where it's welded to the tube. Well, when the inner C is machined, you can see how it's got the flat spot right there. That's where I like to measure from. That's a good consistent point to measure from, because everything outside of that is going to be the same on both sides. There's nothing I have to account for any type of variance of measurement. Looking at the axle now, the pumpkin, this side of the pumpkin, this straight line where the tube goes into the pumpkin, this is my other reference point. So the first two are going to be the inner C's. This is my reference point. By the way, that is not center, but it is a good reference point to do some very simplistic math to figure out what I need to do. Now, couple ways you can do this. The easy, most accurate way is if you have a couple of welding magnets, the 90-degree magnets. But if you don't have those, this is the way to do this right here. And I'm not going to get up because I'll be in front of the camera here. What I'll do is I'll hold it up against the pumpkin right here, and I'll eyeball the end of the tape over to the inner C there. You could use a small square or something if you want to make sure you're lined up to a reference point on here, I suppose. That'd work too. But you want to make sure that's lined up. And then you're going to pull your tape out, and then you're going to try to eyeball or use another square if you can, if you have the hands or a helper. And you want to take the measurement from the flat spot of that inner C to this line right here where the tube goes inside the pumpkin. Now, I can tell you already that that measurement is 19 inches. Yours may vary. These axle assemblies can vary by just a little bit, I think. So make sure you do your own measurements, and then you can do your math. So this here is exactly 19 inches. Coming over to this side over here, I will measure that to the pumpkin there, and it's 21.5. So when you look at that 19 to 21.5, that's going to give us 2.5 inches that we need to account for. So that's the shorter side. So I'm going to move it over. If you take 2.5 and divide it by 2, it gives you 1.25 inches. So what I'm going to do is make my mark here at 1.25 inches on the tube. And then I want to take this mark once I get out from behind the camera here, and I'm going to measure up here that 1.25 inches. I'm going to put this mark up top, so when I drop the plumb bob, it will be easy to line up. So let me show you the other way that I prefer to do it, because you get a little bit more accurate measurement than you do by trying to eyeball it. So let me get this magnet in place there. That one's square. So I have these welding magnets here. They let you weld, set things up so it'll be on a perfect 90-degree angle or whatnot. So I'm going to take them. I'm going to line this one up right with the tube there. Perfect. And then that allows me to get around the pumpkin. So I could take my tape measure, put it right there, come over, and as you can see, that's exactly 19 inches there. So that makes that a little bit easier to make sure I get this measurement exact. Now I need to transfer that mark up here. Then I'm going to show you how to take your plumb bob and drop it right down to that tube, and we'll get things lined up. Now it's time to attach the plumb bob. I have a little magnet here that'll hold it to the oil pan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it in the rough position of where I want it, so I know where I need to put my magnet. Make sure it's far enough I get the reading off of the axle here. Now I'm going to take the magnet, pinch the string between the oil pan and the magnet, and then let the plumb bob kind of hang in there. I got to get a little bit more out of it. That should probably be just about right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to double check, make sure I'm lined up perfectly on my mark, which I am. And now as I come out here, I'm going to get this string out of the way first. So as I come out here, I'm going to settle my plumb bob. And as I'm looking, I'm about 1/4 of an inch off, maybe 3/8 of an inch. So the body is shifted this way, the axle shifted that way. So now I need to get them shifted back before I can put in the new track bar. So the question is, how do we do that now? The easiest method that I've done is simply getting a ratchet strap. You're going to attach one to the axle, one to the frame, and then as you tighten it, it's going to move the frame and the body over the direction you need. So if you're off this way, then you would attach it to the axle and one to the frame to move it the other way, and then the opposite if you're trying to move it the other way. In this case here, I'm trying to move the frame to the driver's side. So I'm going to take my ratchet strap, I'm going to put it on the axle down here, and I'm going to put the other end up here on the frame, and as I tighten it, that plumb bob is going to shift that way, and I'm going to continue to tighten until it's lined up perfectly. Once it's lined up perfectly, I'll let the ratchet strap just sit there. I'll get the new track bar adjusted to exactly the width it needs to go into the hole. We are now lined up the way we need to be. That the axle is centered underneath the Jeep, so now we can install the track bar. A couple things I forgot to mention earlier, so to make sure you understand this now. Number one is this has to be done on the ground. Believe me, if I could do it on my lift, it would be so much easier for you to see, so much easier for me to show you things. But this job has to be done on the ground. That's why you're getting the wide angle and trying to see everything that's going on here. So we just finished ratchet strapping. I have my plumb bob lined up exactly on my mark there. Now it's a matter of simply installing the track bar, with one exception. If you are going from a stock track bar to an aftermarket track bar, most aftermarket track bars are going to have you drill out the frame side bracket and sometimes the axle side bracket. Axle side bracket's really easy, and to be honest with you, this one's easy too. It's just that sometimes you got to drop the tie rod or get things out of the way so you can get the right angle to it. So this one actually drills out very easy. The frame side does. Most of them will have you drill it out to 5/8 of an inch, and you want to make sure that you get that thing as straight as possible. You don't want your drill walking on you because you could wallow out the hole and create other problems. So in this case here, if you're going from a stock track bar to aftermarket, you're going to take the time in this step right now to drill a hole. And the reason they do that is this hole in its stock configuration on the frame side bracket, it's tapered. So we need to drill the hole out that way. It is the same diameter to get the appropriate bolt through up and through the bracket there. So that's the whole purpose behind that. It's not hard. This actually drills out very easily. Doesn't take long at all. One of the tricks that I've learned to do is I get a red Solo cup, I cut it down to about an inch or so, and I put the drill bit through the bottom of it, and then as you're holding it up into that, all the shavings fall right into that Solo cup. So use that as a little trick, and it's really easy. It actually goes very quickly. So my hole's already drilled out because I've already installed a previous aftermarket bar. So all I have to do now is get my new Rock Jock track bar, bring it in here. We're going to get it adjusted. And the one thing I want to do before I put it in for final install is make sure the jam nut and everything on it is tight. So let me go grab that. I'll be right back. One other thing I want to point out is this spacer. So let me bring this back here real quick. So when the track bar gets installed, this bolt comes in from the bottom side here. And as it goes up, before the locking nut goes on, this spacer goes on top of the frame side bracket. And the reason is there is a recess there that's offset. And if you try to tighten this bolt without having that spacer in there, it wants to tighten offset. It's going to come loose. You're going to get death wobble. The spacer needs to be in place there, so that way you're not going to have any of those issues. We need to get the frame side installed. If you have something to set the axle side bracket on while you install this, it's going to help out greatly. Otherwise, it hangs so much, the droop creates issues of you trying to get the bolt up through here. So as you can see there, I'm going to take the bolt through the bottom side of the bar and make sure it's in the correct orientation. We're going to slide it up through the bracket right there. I'm going to take that spacer that I talked about, set it on top, ensure that slides down in position. Then we're taking our locking stover nut, get it started, and then we're going to tighten this thing down. We have this one installed and snug. Let's go over and get the axle side adjusted. We'll get that installed. Then we come back at the end and we torque them to spec. On the rock jock, this one here is at 125 foot-pounds, and the axle side will be at 75. Here we are at the axle side. As you can see, as I go to push this up, this thing is going to be significantly short. So I'm going to start by extending it. And remember, when you go to put this back up here, you want this bend to come underneath. You don't want it to point down. You want it to point flat. Looking at that, still gonna be a little bit short. The other thing you need to understand too is that this is working on that arc. So even though it looks like it might be short right here, as it gets up towards the mounting hole, it may actually fit because it's still continuing to work out there. So I'm gonna go one more turn. I'm gonna tap this into place and see how close we are. As luck would have it, we are perfect. Just so you know, that's rare that that ever happens. So the bolt will need to slide in. It'll slide in easily. It's just that it may need a little bit of adjustment as we do that. May have to back it out one turn. Let me see here. Yep, we'll have to back it out one turn. We'll get that adjusted, and then the bolt will slide in. I knew that was too good to be true. There it is right there. I'm going to get some blue Loctite, put it on the back side. We're going to tighten this up. I can't stress enough about torquing these to spec. Very, very important. That's what keeps you from getting death wobble. The clamping force is what holds us in place. It's not the size of the bolt hole. You could have a slightly smaller bolt and the clamping force is still what holds it in place. So make sure you are getting these things torqued all the way to spec. Once you get those two bolts torqued, they're where they need to be, your axle centered. You can lose your plumb bob out of there, you can take your ratchet strap off, and everything's gonna hold center, but we're not done yet. Take a look up there. You see how the barrel for the Johnny joint is angled down? So ride height, I want to get that thing pretty flat, just like that. So that way it's right in the middle of its travel. And the reason I want to do that now is because I have to tighten up this jam nut. And if I tighten the jam nut with this thing all the way forward, then when I start articulating, it's going to cause it to go into bind. So right there is in its perfect spot of travel at ride height. So now I'm going to take some blue Loctite, apply blue Loctite to the threads. I'm going to tighten that jam nut down and get it snug up against the barrel. When I'm all done with that, I'm going to put my witness marks on there. You can see I already had one white mark there from the previous one, but I'm going to put the marks on here because it makes it easy to see right away if anything is shifted or moved. And this is a really important piece that you don't want coming loose, because that's what will create all of your death wobble. Finally, all wrapped up. As you can see here, I have this bolt torqued and marked. I have the nut up top torqued and marked. I have the jam nut blue Loctited, tightened down and marked. This is flat at ride height here. Everything is in good shape. I'm going to tell you what, this video is a lot harder to do than I thought it was going to be, for the mere fact of I don't have a whole lot of room down here to move around and show you things and do this. It takes two hands. A really tough video to do. So if I'm missing anything or you have questions on anything, be sure to drop comments down there and I'll respond just as soon as I can. So this wraps it up for this. The only other thing I need to do still, though, is this particular track bar has greasable zerks there, so I want to make sure those have enough grease. I'm not too concerned. I inspected them. They look like they're just fine, but I want to make sure that they're set up the way they need to be, and that's it. So that's it for this video. We'll see you on the next one.